running more material. So we got more organics coming through.
Exactly right. Nope, they're doing their job, bud.
Yep. Good job, Fredo. We did okay.
We did all right.
In the icy wilds of the Yukon, where jagged peaks pierce the sky and silence rules the valleys, two miners were barely hanging on. Levi and Corey had gambled everything, every cent, every ounce of faith, on a remote, hard rock gold mine. What was supposed to be their shot at freedom was quickly turning into a slow, brutal collapse. The gold wasn't showing up. Their gear was outdated and falling apart. Day after day, they chipped at stone with a jackhammer too small for the job, only to haul bags of worthless rock down a treacherous trail to a wash plant that leaked more gold than it saved. Every cleanup ended the same: empty pans, crushed hopes, and no paycheck. They were tired, broke, nearly broken. But then, just as the dream was about to die, two legends showed up. Freddie Dodge and Wani Bar, veterans of gold mining and risk-taking, arrived with one last shot. Not advice, not pity, a bold, costly, all-or-nothing plan to flip the mine's fate, or bury it for good. What followed wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a turning point. Because when the dust cleared and the mountain cracked open, they didn't just find gold. They found a secret lost to time. This failing mine had become something far stranger. The doorway to a mystery no one could explain. And what comes next might rewrite everything we thought we knew about the Yukon. Subscribe now, because this is no ordinary gold story. It's only just begun. The cold was cruel, but the silence was worse. Inside the narrow tunnel, every echo of the jackhammer bounced back, like a reminder of how little progress they'd made. The rock face didn't care how tired they were. It didn't care about their dreams. By noon, Levi's arms were numb from vibration. His head throbbed from the noise, and sweat had soaked through his thermal layers despite the freezing air. The tool coughed and sputtered in his hands like it might give up before he did. Corey was farther back in the shaft, dragging buckets of debris toward daylight. Neither man had spoken in hours, not because they were angry, but because they were exhausted. Words took energy, and energy was something they were running out of. It was another day of backbreaking labor for a few more pounds of dull, grey stone. Stone they'd crush, wash, and pray over, hoping a glimmer of gold might finally show. That night, Levi sat by the fire, staring into the flames, silent. He finally muttered, "Feels like we're bleeding into this mountain." Corey just nodded, jaw tight, eyes hollow. That's when it became clear. The mine wasn't just failing, it was eating them alive, one slow, painful day at a time. Levi and Corey were stuck using a small jackhammer, the kind that could barely chip away at the rock face. It was like trying to dig through a mountain with a spoon. Every day, they spent hours breaking off tiny bits of rock. Dusty, heavy, exhausting work. And for what? A few buckets of crushed stone they hoped might contain traces of gold. But the hard part wasn't over yet. Once they had their rock, they had to drive it down an old, narrow road that twisted dangerously down the side of a steep hill. There were no guardrails. One wrong move could send their truck tumbling into the ravine below. It was slow, risky, and terrifying, especially when they were already worn down from hours inside the mine. At the bottom of the hill was their wash plant, the machine that was supposed to separate gold from the rock. But even that wasn't working right. It was old, inefficient, and worse. It was actually losing gold. Instead of catching the fine particles of gold, it was spitting them right out the back. After an entire day of digging, hauling, and cleaning, all they had to show for it were a few tiny specks of gold dust, not even enough to weigh. They were working themselves into the ground. For nothing. Every gallon of diesel they burned, every bolt that broke, every piece of gear they had to repair, it was all draining their last bit of cash and hope. The dream they once chased with fire in their hearts was now a heavy weight on their shoulders. They were exhausted, broke, and dangerously close to walking away for good. But then, something changed. Out of nowhere, two legends of the gold world, Freddie Dodge and Wani Bar, arrived at the mine. They looked around, they saw the problems, and they offered a wild idea that could flip everything upside down. It wasn't a small fix, it was a complete overhaul. Freddie and Juan told Levi and Corey that for about $7,000 and a promise of 4 ounces of gold at the end of the season, they could turn the mine into a real operation. It was a big risk, but it was also their only shot. Their plan had 3 major changes. First, they would bring in an electronic blasting system. Instead of slowly chipping away with that jackhammer, Levi could now safely blast large sections of the rock wall in one go, freeing up gold-rich material in a fraction of the time. Second, they'd eliminate that dangerous road entirely. In its place, they'd install a 180-foot pipe running from the mine straight down to the wash plant. They could just dump the rock in at the top, and gravity would do the rest. No more risky drives, no more wasted time. Third, they'd replace the failing gold catching system. Out went the old, leaky machine. In came a custom-built sluice box, which uses flowing water to trap heavier gold pieces. But Freddie had one more trick, a concentrating spiral. This machine would grab even the smallest flakes of gold that the sluice might miss, squeezing every last bit of value out of the rock. It was a bold strategy. It was expensive, and it was a gamble. But for Levi and Corey, it was a lifeline. Now the question was simple. Could this crazy plan actually save their dream? Or would it be the final blow in a journey that had already pushed them to the edge? Juan knew what he needed. He just didn't know if it still existed. Buried somewhere out there, in a scrapyard or an old prospector's garage, was a rare piece of gold mining history. A concentrating spiral from the 1940s. A machine once considered revolutionary, designed to use nothing more than gravity and flowing water to separate precious gold from useless rock. If he could find one, and if he could bring it back to life, it might just be the missing link Levi and built sluice box, which uses flowing water to trap heavier gold pieces. But Freddie had one more trick, a concentrating spiral. This machine would grab even the smallest flakes of gold that the sluice might miss, squeezing every last bit of value out of the rock. It was a bold strategy. It was expensive, and it was a gamble. But for Levi and Corey, it was a lifeline. Now the question was simple. Could this crazy plan actually save their dream? Or would it be the final blow in a journey that had already pushed them to the edge? Juan knew what he needed. He just didn't know if it still existed. Buried somewhere out there, in a scrapyard or an old prospector's garage, was a rare piece of gold mining history. A concentrating spiral from the 1940s. A machine once considered revolutionary, designed to use nothing more than gravity and flowing water to separate precious gold from useless rock. If he could find one, and if he could bring it back to life, it might just be the missing link Levi and Corey needed to finally catch all the fine gold their wash plant had been throwing away. So Juan hit the road. Hours turned into days. Then, in a dusty corner of a rural yard in Washington state, he spotted it. a massive cast-iron spiral, rusted, weather-beaten, and silent. Time had nearly swallowed it. But Juan could see what others couldn't. A sleeping giant, waiting to work again. He bought it, loaded the heavy beast onto a trailer, and hauled it back across the mountains to their workshop. The clock was ticking. The mine wasn't running, and the gold wasn't waiting. But the spiral had other plans. The moment they started inspecting it, Freddy's brow furrowed. "This pipe's packed up with stuff," he muttered, tapping the main channel with a wrench. "I've been beating on it with a hammer to no avail. We'll give it a colonoscopy and a throat check here and try to get on it." Inside the spiral's main pipe, a collapsed rubber liner had hardened into a thick, unbreakable plug. Decades of dust, weather, and corrosion had sealed it shut. They tried scraping. They tried hammering. Nothing worked. They were running out of time and patience. Then Freddy, in true mad scientist fashion, reached for the only thing crazy enough to work: a massive blowtorch capable of reaching temperatures up to 5,700 degrees Fahrenheit. "All right, let's cook this thing out," he said, eyes locked on the pipe like it was a bomb ready to blow. The flame roared to life. Heat licked the iron casing as thick smoke poured from the mouth of the pipe. The old rubber liner inside began to crackle, melt, and finally burn away. It was hot, dangerous, and completely insane. But it worked. When the fire cleared, the spiral's channel was open for the first time in 80 years. Clean, clear, ready. They had done it. They had resurrected a piece of mining history and turned it into Levi's secret weapon. They bolted the spiral into the new gold recovery system beside the sluice box. Water pumped through it. The spiral spun to life. The sound was unmistakable, like an ancient engine humming back to purpose. Now, everything was ready. The system was rebuilt. The machines were tuned, and the 80-year-old spiral was at the heart of it all. Levi and Corey stood back, tense but hopeful. This was the moment of truth. Would this entire operation finally pay off? Or would it all burn out like the rubber inside that pipe? The moment they'd been waiting for had finally arrived. After weeks of uncertainty, grueling work, and a daring overhaul, Levi and Corey stood beside Freddy and Juan, watching as their new system roared to life. The crushed rock flowed perfectly through the new 180-foot pipe, gliding smoothly downhill like liquid stone. It landed right where it needed to, in the custom-built sluice box. Water rushed through the system with force and clarity, washing the gold-heavy material across the ripples. For the first time since they'd opened the mine, no breakdowns, no back-breaking drives down the hill, no panic, just movement, just flow. But the real test wasn't just whether the machine could run, it was whether it could catch the gold. Freddy grabbed a gold pan and walked to the end of the system, the final tailings point. If gold was still slipping through here, they'd know the spiral and sluice weren't doing their job. He dipped his pan into the dark, wet sand, scooping up a handful of leftovers, and began to swirl. Everyone watched silently. One pan, nothing. A second, still nothing. Freddy knelt in closer, narrowing his eyes, shaking his head slowly. A grin tugged at the edge of his face. "I can't see a speck," he finally said. "It's clean. Really clean." Corey let out a long breath. He hadn't realized he was holding. Levi's shoulders dropped, not from defeat, but from overwhelming relief. Juan nodded quietly, a rare smile spreading across his face. "That's what I wanted to see," he said. Now came the real reward, the gold cleanup. The crew shut down the system. Water stopped flowing. silence took over, and anticipation filled the air. They began carefully cleaning the sluice mats, brushing down every bit of black sand and concentrate into a pan. Bit by bit, the gold began to appear, not specks, not crumbs, but a real pile. The kind of pile they had only dreamed about. Golden flakes, bright and unmistakable, clustered in the bottom of the pan like sunlight trapped in gravel. Freddy poured the material onto the scale, and the numbers began to rise, slowly at first, then faster. 6.8 ounces. Levi's eyes widened. Corey looked stunned. They both stared at the number, trying to process what it meant. "That's not just a good cleanup," Freddy said. "That's 50 times what you were pulling before." 50? Levi echoed, still in disbelief. "Yeah," Freddy nodded. "With the old setup, you were lucky to get 1/10 of an ounce. Now, you're easily on track to hit 3 ounces a week, maybe more." The weight of that sentence hit them harder than any pickaxe ever could. For the first time, they weren't running a money pit. They were running a mine. Levi wiped the sweat and grime from his forehead. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from joy. The kind of joy that only comes when you've walked through failure and come out the other side. He looked at Corey, who gave him a small, tired smile. No words were needed. Their dream wasn't just alive, it was finally breathing on its own. "Big difference was, before you guys ran 150 pounds, Freddy said. "Maybe not even that," Corey nodded. "Today, we ran 500, Freddy continued. "And watching it, I think we can turn that up even more." I think so too," Levi said, voice shaking. "I really do." It wasn't just a technical fix. It wasn't just a better machine. It was a second chance. And they weren't going to waste it. When you talk about big finds in the world of gold mining, one name always rises to the top: Parker Schnabel. From a teenager running his grandfather's old claim to one of the most successful miners in Discovery Channel history, Parker has become a living legend. He's had seasons where his crew has pulled over 8,000 ounces of gold, worth more than $15 million. His sharp instincts, relentless work ethic, and willingness to take bold risks have put him in a league of his own. Then there's Tony Beats, the king of the Klondike. Known for his booming voice, no-nonsense attitude, and signature red beard, Tony has spent millions of dollars resurrecting massive, century-old gold dredges, machines so big they look like they belong in a steel museum rather than a mine. But Tony doesn't just buy them for show, he brings them back to life. And in doing so, he's extracted thousands of ounces of gold from the frozen Yukon ground. These men represent what's possible in the gold rush world. Big machines, big risks, and even bigger paydays. But there's another side to this story, a side that reminds us gold mining isn't just about ounces and profits, it's about people. And sometimes, those people are lost too soon. Fans of Gold Rush still remember the passing of Grandpa John Schnabel, Parker's beloved grandfather and mentor. More than just a wise old miner, Grandpa John was the emotional core of the show. His gentle advice, sharp wit, and deep love for his grandson touched millions. When he passed away at the age of 96, it was more than a loss for Parker. It was a loss for every viewer who had come to see him as family. And more recently, tragedy struck again. Jesse Goins, a cast member from Gold Rush. Dave Turin's lost mine, passed away suddenly while working at a mine site. His death shocked the entire mining community, a sobering reminder that while the work might look like adventure on TV, it's real, dangerous, and unpredictable. Jesse's warm spirit, enthusiasm, and dedication made him a fan favorite. His sudden passing left a hole not just in his team, but in the hearts of everyone who watched him chase his dream. Because the truth is, the gold rush world is about more than gold. It's about families who dig together, friends who bet it all on a claim, young miners learning from old ones, and every once in a while, it's about the people we lose along the way. Sometimes the biggest drama doesn't play out in the dirt. It plays out in a hospital room, a courtroom, or during a quiet moment at camp when someone doesn't come back. And in those moments, gold means very little. What matters are the bonds these miners forge under pressure, the legacies they leave behind, and the resilience it takes to keep going, even after the gold is gone. But in the end, the biggest reward for Levi and Corey wasn't measured in ounces. Yes, the gold was real, 50 times more than before. And yes, the new system meant they could finally make a living from their claim. For the first time, their mine wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But the true jackpot? It was hope. Before Freddie and Juan showed up, Levi and Corey were on the edge of giving up. They were exhausted, broke, and questioning everything. But the rescue mission they received was more than a technical upgrade. It was a lifeline, a reminder that failure doesn't have to be the end. It can be the turning point. Smart ideas, relentless work, and the right kind of help turned a collapsing dream into a comeback story. This wasn't just a win for the mine. It was a win for belief, for learning that even in the darkest moments, the right change can open up a whole new future. Freddie and Juan brought more than experience. They brought clarity and heart, and a plan built not just on machines, but on trust, courage, and teamwork. But not every miner gets a visit from gold legends. Out there in the wild, remote corners of the mining world, countless small-time crews are still fighting for their chance, digging through failure, hoping for a break. Some find gold, some don't. And not every story gets a camera crew or a second chance. So maybe the real story here isn't about a payday. It's about perseverance, about what happens when people refuse to give up, about how the right idea, at the right time, from the right people, can change everything. Because in the world of mining, and in life, sometimes the richest finds are buried beneath the moments you almost quit. If this story inspired you, if you believe in second chances, or if you've ever been one smart move away from your breakthrough, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because out here, gold isn't just in the ground, it's in the grit.